Gun reform alone won't address white supremacist extremism. Editors note the opinions in this article are the authors, as published by our content partner, and do not necessarily represent the views of MSN or Microsoft. Across the United States, Americans went to bed Saturday night grieving a mass shooting perpetrated by a white supremacist that killed 20 people in El Paso, Texas, and woke up to the news of another mass shooting in Dayton, Ohio, which left 10 dead. Although no idea whether the Dayton shooting has clear ideological motivations or not, one thing is clear: it will help boost global white supremacy anyway. Repeated mass shootings and far-right terrorist attacks are textbook cases of what white supremacists call acceleration, an imperative to sow chaos and societal disruption in order to bring about a race war, apocalyptic end times, and an eventual societal resurrection and rebirth. Within hours of they are referring to the principle of acceleration. While most people, the manifestos of the mass shooters in Oslo and Christchurch were rife with dystopian fantasies about demographic replacement and white genocide. Both texts the Great Replacement is not a new concept. Decades ago, what's different now is that we are closer to the demographic changes that underpin replacement and genocide conspiracy theories. It is well documented. Conspiracies like the Great Replacement and mottos like 14 words are used to inspire anger, resentment, and hate, coupled with fear of imminent and existential danger and a sense of betrayal and backlash against elites deemed responsible. But existential, what were once frequently written off as fringe conspiracy theories and doomsday cult fantasies about demographic replacement, are now increasingly understood as underpinning global connections across the far right and inspiring individuals to engage in terrorist acts and violent action. This happens in part at the most extreme fringe. Far-right extremists not only believe that a violent apocalypse is coming, but also argue they have an obligation to accelerate this societal collapse by speeding up polarization and engaging in violent acts in order to bring about the ultimate phase of rebirth and civilizational restoration more quickly. Terrorist attacks. Acceleration means that even if no far-right motive is clear in the Dayton case at this writing, the shooting serves global white supremacist goals anyway. Each mass attack, what can we do to interrupt this process? In the short term, the media, scholars, and the general public must be more intentional about how we share information produced by the far right, in order to avoid being complicit in the spread of white supremacist ideas. Sharing links to much of the public discourse will focus on the need for serious and transformative gun control legislation. This is the only long-term solution to interrupt the growth of far-right extremism is sustained education in schools, at home, in religious communities, sports teams, and anywhere youth gather that reframes demographic change as a strength instead of a threat. We also need to. It may sound glib to say that our diversity is our strength. But the real question. Cynthia Miller Idris is professor of education and sociology at American University. Her most recent
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.